Welcome into another edition of the James Boyd Podcast. I, of course, am James Boyd, joined by my editor, Jim Aiello. And Jim, we have quarterback news. QB1 in Indianapolis is, you're familiar with him, Daniel Jones, not Anthony Richardson. It is a seismic decision for the franchise, to say the least. We have been all over it at The Athletic. Me and you have burned the midnight oil, I think, a few times this week, getting stories together, getting reactions together, and now we can finally bring it to you in audio form. So that's where we're at, Jim. And boy, is this a different feeling than we had last year at this time, and obviously a couple years ago at this time when they had just drafted Anthony Richardson. That is the second benching in 9 months for the player they drafted fourth overall just 2 years ago.
I was gonna say, I'm gonna start there because you refer to this as a benching, and technically it's not. But I definitely want you to explain your side of things because it was a quarterback competition, it was an open quarterback competition. So technically they're not benching him. So why do you see it that way? And I agree with you, but I am curious. Like you think explaining it is the way to go here.
Yeah, I think that's just a term that I've used because he was the incumbent starter in a way.
Yeah.
Like it was his job in my mind to lose,
Okay.
and he lost it. So I can't really say, yeah, I guess
That's fair.
benching isn't necessarily the right term, but technically, I guess it still counts because he is going to the bench when you're not starting. You can't,
Right.
be in the game. But to me, I just look at it as a chance to sort of establish, at least for myself, the way I view it. The Colts have basically said for a second time that
Yes.
Anthony Richardson is not our guy. He cannot be the guy that we trust to go out there and win. And
Yep.
now I think doing this a second time reinforces the fact that they believe, at least at this moment in time, that they don't think his future is worth risking for the present. And that to me is a bigger development than perhaps the first benching. Last year, when it
Yeah.
happened, you can kind of save face or kind of say, you know what? Give him some time. Let's sit
Yeah.
him
You had the tap
down.
out. There was
Yeah,
cover.
yeah, exactly. And the tap out, which again is just an egregious mistake by Anthony
Yeah.
Richardson. He said that himself. He knows that. But now it's like, well, he spent all summer trying to improve. You all said he improved, and he still isn't able to win the starting job over a guy who is, trying to revive his career after being 20 games under 500 in New York with the Giants. So that's where I'm at. I'm curious to see how
No.
you view it. How do you frame it or square it? Because, I left probably last week after the Green Bay Packers game thinking, okay, well, I'll give Anthony a slight lead in this thing. But then I started hearing, a few rumblings here or there, going back to listen to Shane Steichen, going back listening to what Daniel Jones said, and I started to think, and credit to Stephen Holder of ESPN and Kevin Bowen of 107.5 The Fan, those two were probably on it earlier than me, as far as like James, because we all talk about this stuff, but it was like, James, listen to what they're saying.
Yeah.
And then I was like, behind the scenes, me and you, make sure you have the other story ready in
Yeah.
case Daniel Jones is the starter. And because it really could happen, and it did happen.
So I will say, like when I was editing your stories and I saw that you said a second benching, my instinct initially was to take it out, and then I was just like, no, he's right. This is, I mean, again, even if it's not technically a benching where he was the starter, and that's how it has to be framed. That's how it has to be seen. Is that they've decided that he is not good enough. So I was to say, I'm like, what am I going to call him? We can say not bench. We can say he's a loser. I could just call him that because he
Yeah.
lost the quarterback competition. So no, the benching. I just wanted you to give the listeners kind of an overview of why that's how you're perceiving it, because I think that is the right way to perceive it. Is that it is another benching for Anthony Richardson, which is like in your story from today that everybody should go check out. This is the Michael Scott office snip snap sit start. Like it's
Yeah.
just like they go back and forth on what they're going to do with him, what the plan is. Like you and I went back and forth on this last night. Like he comes in, he's raw, he needs a lot of reps. Okay, nope, that we're going to change our mind on that. Reps aren't as important anymore. Now he needs to sit back and learn. Well, Joe Flacco's not so good, so let's get him back in there, and he needs to get the reps. And now, he gets in the off season, and well, sit back and learn. It's best for his development. It's like, what is it? What do you want from him? And again, this is part of the reason why, again, to credit Stephen Holder, who gets twice in the podcast in the first like 10 minutes here, talking to his agent, and saying that the trust is, it does essentially, to paraphrase what the agent said, the trust is questionable right now. It's not there
Yeah.
because I don't think they've been clear with anybody what the plan is for Anthony Richardson. It's even if his agent, and again, his agent is, that's his client, he's defending him. I get it,
Yeah,
but like
absolutely.
he should know what the plan is for Anthony Richardson
Especially for
because
that caliber of player. Like this
that's what I
isn't an
mean.
undrafted
Yes,
rookie saying,
exactly.
"Am I going to make the team on cut down day in a couple of days here next Tuesday?"
Yes.
This is the highest drafted player since Andrew Luck for this team.
And they don't have a clear. And again, there's no wondering anymore why the messaging isn't clear because we've always thought, hey, and known Shane Steichen is not a very good messenger for any of this. But now we know why the message isn't clear. The plan isn't clear. So how could the message be clear? They don't have a plan, or at least they're not sticking to whatever the plan was. And now this is why the message gets all funky and nobody understands what they're thinking or what's going on or why they're doing what they're doing. And Shane Steichen, he just is not great at going up in front of the media and explaining the reasoning behind some of the decisions they're making. Again, he maybe he's trying to protect his players. Maybe he doesn't feel like he needs to answer to anybody, but it just makes him look worse. And it makes again, it makes fans angrier and it confuses clearly members of your team and their representatives. So yeah, I mean, maybe we should start at the beginning on this, like why they chose Daniel Jones. I think you and I both agree it's a defensible decision. Anthony Richardson, before we get to anything else, Anthony Richardson, and I would say that I have been a pretty staunch defender of his potential and future. So when I say this, I mean it. He hasn't done anything to deserve. Like Mina Kimes put this really well the other day. You can be frustrated with the decision the Colts made, but you can't be outraged for Anthony Richardson. Anthony
Right.
Richardson hasn't earned your outrage. He just hasn't. Like he hasn't stayed healthy. He hasn't been consistent on the field. He hasn't hit those short passes. Like all the things that you needed him to do, he's shown in spurts, but he hasn't done it consistently. And
Right.
that is what the Colts asked him to be, was consistent, and he hasn't. So picking Daniel Jones, I get where they're coming from on that. That's not even the frustration I think that Colts fans have, or that you kind of showed in the story about the
Right.
way that Steichen handled this. Is just, but at the end of the day, like now I don't know. Well, I'll just say personally, I'm frustrated because like I care so much less about the Colts, I guess, as a team with Daniel Jones. As like, there's no to me, there's no future with Daniel Jones. At least with
Yeah.
Anthony Richardson, I was getting an answer. Their stakes are higher. Maybe that's what it is. It's just stakes. Like Richardson, it goes out there, and like I have. We're gonna see if he's the guy,
Yeah.
maybe
Sink
or
or
not.
swim type of thing. Do or die.
Right. With Daniel Jones, like I just think the I think people keep saying the floor is higher. The floor is pretty low, and that's I don't watching a team with a low floor and a low ceiling is boring. So that's where I'm a little frustrated. But dive into the decision that they made, and maybe I'll put you in the weird spot of saying defend the Colts' decision of starting
Yeah.
starting Daniel Jones ahead of Anthony Richardson.
So I think it starts with three things: the injuries. You have been injured. And the hard part for Anthony and the damning part, actually, there's a few damning parts, but number one on that list, I think, is injuries. You've missed time, even this offseason, when you're not playing football, when you're not going out there to get hit, and you're not being put in harm's way. You couldn't make it through the spring without getting hurt. You missed, I believe, 7 of 9 OTA practices because you messed up your shoulder and had some shoulder soreness going on. And so you had to miss time then. That gives Daniel Jones a leg up, obviously, with this team. He takes all the first team reps to close out the spring. You come back in the summer, preseason opener. You misdiagnose the blitz, which, based off of what we heard from former NFL quarterbacks, one of them being Kurt Warner, this is rudimentary stuff. This is basic stuff. You should know this by year 3. You misdiagnose the blitz. You get hit, by a free rusher that you should have seen, and you dislocate your right pinky in your throwing hand. You get knocked out of the game, 6 snaps, all you get. And yeah, in a real game, you probably pop that baby back in and go back out there and keep playing. But the optics of that was not good, Jim. Because again, the
No.
narrative then becomes you're hurt for a second time this
Yep.
offseason before you've played a game. So to me, injuries. The second I in the equation to me has to do with the inaccuracy. This is a guy who, for his career, is, I believe, slightly, and I say slightly, very loosely, I think it's 50.1% for his career as a passer, 47.7% last year as a passer, the worst mark in the league, lowest mark in the league. And then when you look at the last I in the equation, in my opinion, it's immaturity. You had to get benched for 2 games last year because they said you were not working hard enough. You were not bringing what needed to be brought to that position. You didn't understand the magnitude of being QB1. So to me, that is a sort of 3 strikes you're out sort of thing. You know what I mean? Like where
Yeah.
you can't really look or grasp on anything that to me really shows that you're ready to be a franchise quarterback. And then on top of that, because of all of those things, what can we look at and say this is where you had a good performance? This is where you were a great quarterback. To me, he's only really had one great game in the NFL, and that was the Jets game when he came right back from the
Yep.
benching last year. Ironically enough, you lose 2 weeks in your development plan, and then you go back out there and you ball
Nah.
out.
Yeah.
But outside of that, he's had good games. I would say he had a good game his rookie year, maybe against the Rams. He's had a couple of good moments to drive against the Patriots. But the totality of who Anthony Richardson is, the totality of his resume, to me, is just not there. I just think that, again, going back to what you've said, what others have said, you cannot feel outraged or feel like you have this instance where he was wronged to some degree or
Yeah.
somebody hurt Anthony Richardson or they were out to get him. They gave Anthony Richardson $34 million guaranteed as a number 4 pick. They believed in him enough to draft him. Now we can get into what's happened outside of just him, but him in a vacuum? No, I cannot feel sorry for this player who has not produced nearly to the level he needs to be trusted to be not only a franchise quarterback, but just a starting caliber quarterback in this league. So, do I feel to a degree for Anthony? Yes. But do I feel sorry for him? Not necessarily. I don't think that that's the case or that what the lens I can look at this through. And I believe I've stated that, repeatedly, and whether it's, here on the podcast, Jim, or us collaboratively going back and forth in some of these pieces, me writing stuff, you editing, and us kind of just making sure we're not being sort of the apologist for Anthony Richardson because
Yeah.
you really can't be just considering the lack of resume. I think you look at him and, you know, the hard part and the sad part for him is that the number one reason or the number one overarching thing that people remember him for is the tap out
Yeah.
outside of
Yep.
Indianapolis. Like I talk
No.
to friends back home. I'm sure you probably have conversations with people around the league.
Yep.
They all want to know, hey, by the way, what the heck happened there? And that is something that's very hard to live down and kind of in a microcosm sums up his entire tenure with the team. In that game, he was inaccurate, he was immature, and obviously, like I said, he's unable to stay healthy. So it's tough. It is tough.
No, I think you're right. I mean, like I think if you look at Mike Sando's QB tiers, that came up. The tap out comes up. It always comes up when it comes talk about Anthony Richardson. It will be his legacy until he does something to undo that. And right now, he's not going to get the opportunity to. Right? He's just going to sit on the bench. Yeah, I'm thinking about Mike Sando's QB tiers. I'm thinking about some of those anonymous quotes that he gets, and they say that they said this before this happened, but that the experiment is over. So I want to know what you think about that. That's the next thing. I mean, we can obviously talk about Daniel Jones, but we'll have a lot of time to talk about Daniel Jones. So,
Yeah,
do you, in your heart, I guess, head, I don't know what it is, do you
my
believe
big
that
heart.
they're done? Because it feels like they're done with him. Um, and I'll preface this by saying I have a rosy picture I could paint and tried to paint to James, tried to sell to James, and, and he wasn't buying
That was
on
not the
Anthony
Mona
Richardson
Lisa.
stuff.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. So, and I will give that pitch at one point, but I do want to hear your thoughts on this. Like, if at this point right now, are they done? I'll put it a different way. I'll make you answer the question that you have asked Shane Steichen, which is essentially, is Anthony Richardson going to play another game, start another game for this team? Is that in his future at this point?
So I think he will start another game for this team, mainly because I don't trust Daniel Jones to stay healthy for an entire season. He's
Yeah.
only done it once in his career, so there's my little cop-out answer. You can think I was that slithery, Jim. But to answer the question more fully, which basically means, will he be the guy again?
Yeah,
I don't think
intentionally.
so.
Will they start?
Yeah,
him?
I don't think so. And I say that because unless Daniel Jones is just downright awful, which is, possible given his resume, to give up on this guy, which is what they're doing, and I'm sick of them trying to say they're not doing it, to give up on Anthony Richardson, which is justifiable again,
Yeah.
but to give up on him for a second time, to me, is very hard to overcome, especially with the same franchise. We have not really seen that. I was actually reading through some of the comments, Jim, of my story on the Colts saying basically, we haven't quit on him. Yo, yes, you did. And one of the commenters was like, well, Terry Bradshaw back in 1970 got benched, blah, blah. They went on to win Super Bowl. I'm like, well, if you got to go back 50 years to find examples of when this worked, that to me tells me that largely it hasn't worked, not with the same team. So when you have a young quarterback who I was able to ask Anthony Richardson after the news came out about being benched again or losing his job for a second time, do you have faith in the Colts' plan for you and your future? And Jim, get the organs ready and get the communion ready. He told me I have faith in God. And so I'm
Yeah.
like, am I at church or am I at the Colts facility? Like, what's going on here? And that response to me was the milder version of what we got from his agent, Derek Jackson, who
Agreed.
talked to
100%.
ESPN Stephen Holder and told him kind of flatly, there's no trust here right now. We don't really trust these guys. And from that standpoint, I can't trust them either. And I think me and you have kind of gone back and forth, a lot of Slack messages and emails and phone calls, text messages, just laying out how, again, Anthony is not this blameless victim, but
Of
he's
course not.
also not the one that's going to get, in my opinion, or should get 100% of the blame
No.
because the plans that they've had, they've never stuck to them. And really, Jim, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this because I had honestly forgotten how all of this went. And this is why I felt the need to really hold Steichen's feet to the fire. Because to me, although Chris Ballard is kind of following the sword a bit,
Yeah.
Shane is basically like, hey, he got hurt. It is what it is. My hands are scot free. I've done nothing wrong. I'm paraphrasing here and obviously exaggerating a bit, but
Hmm.
I go back to last season when he had the tap out, he got benched, and the world seemed like it was just falling down on this guy, and we were all thinking, man, you really stepped in some you know what, and it was justified to bench you. I mean, the entire NFL world called you soft repeatedly, and some of them
Yep.
still call you soft because you tapped out of a game because you were tired, not injured, not concussed, not dazed, not dehydrated, whatever. I was tired. That can't be an excuse. And so they sit him down for 2 weeks, but they tell us at the time, this is for the rest of the season. Okay, fine. I didn't agree with it at the time because I thought that Joe Flacco was just not a winning quarterback. Joe Flacco, ding, ding,
Who'd have
ding,
guessed?
not a winning quarterback. I mean, not anymore. He was bad.
Yeah.
They played bad. And at the time, they were 500.
Yep.
You play Joe Flacco 2 games in a row. You drop 2 games under 500. And then because you're so desperate, you throw Anthony right back into the starting lineup. So forget having to sit and wait, learn how to be a pro,
Earn
take
it.
a back seat, earn it, all of these things.
Yep.
You, for reasons of your own self-preservation, Shane Steichen, that is, you were like, you know what? Wait a second. We can't win with Joe Flacco. We got to go back to the other guy. But what about his development? So what changed? At first, you said his development needed to be him playing. So you played him. Then you said it was no, you got to sit for the rest of the season. Then he sat. The rest of the season lasted 2 weeks, and you put him right back in. And so why should people believe in whatever plan you have now? Why should Anthony believe in whatever plan you have now when even if initially when you benched him, it was going to hurt him, it might have hurt his confidence, it might have hurt his feelings. But if you had stuck with it, at least you would have some conviction
Agreed.
in what you're saying now. Because what you're saying now is, Daniel will start for the rest of the season. Is he?
No.
Every Colts fan I know is asking me, all right, James, like when they go, if they start the season 1-2 or 0-3, are they going to be saying that he's still the guy for the rest of the season?
That's when you say Joe Flacco's the guy for the rest of the season, you replace him after 2 weeks. When you say Daniel Jones is the guy for the rest of the season, it's in your story. It says, well, we'll see how many games that lasts. Maybe
That's
it'll
what
be
I'm
two, maybe it'll be
saying.
three this time. Like, I'll take it back even further to your point though. Like, let's go back to the beginning. And when they drafted him and they told us reps, this guy needs reps, which understandable. He has fewer than 400 passes in his career in college. You did that story last year on him and Bo Nix and how Bo Nix
Oh,
has
yeah,
essentially
that was
like
crazy.
quadrupled him in the amount of attempts he has. I mean, I was looking at Cam Ward numbers the other day because again, like they're roughly the same age. That dude threw 1,200 passes in his final 3 years at college. Doesn't even count the first years at Immaculate Word. Like
Right.
so much more experience. So he needs reps. Okay, I can get on board with that. I think I was supportive of that. I thought that made sense. But then you had 4 months with him between the time you drafted him and the time you anointed him the starter, which Shane Steichen did, and you quoted in your story today saying he works his tail off. He does that. Okay, all right, hold on now. Like, it's 4 months you had him. Did you Did he do everything he was supposed to be doing? Were his work habits what they were supposed to be? Was he putting in extra time in the film room? Was he putting in extra time with his receivers? Was he doing all those things? Because you told us he was. But if he wasn't, why didn't that get fixed? And if he was
Right.
doing it, did it go away in year two? That doesn't make any sense. Like he stopped doing those things? I don't think that's what it was. So you were either covering it up and thinking he'll get away with it because he has enormous talent, which maybe, but like doesn't really foster good habits going forward. And most guys
Right.
can't just get away with it on talent. So then you go into year two, and all of a sudden these issues crop up. Yeah, he's not putting in the time. He's not preparing the right way. And it's like, there's no way these issues only became a thing in year two. I
Right.
can't see that. So why didn't you do something to stop it earlier or to correct it earlier or to, again, you don't have to throw the guy under the bus. You don't have to tell the media, but to me, you and I have talked about this. Get a backup quarterback who is interested in mentoring a veteran backup quarterback who's interested in mentoring a young quarterback. Joe Flacco's not. Not his fault. That's not even an insult. Just Joe Flacco's. That's not his thing. He said
And
he
he
doesn't really
told
care
us
about.
that himself.
He says it, so it's totally
Right.
fine. But they bring in a guy who's not really interested in mentoring or showing the ropes. Like, do something to show this guy what it means to be. I know he had Sam Ellinger, but Sam's never been there, not in that way, right? He's never been like in a way. Daniel Jones is kind of the guy, right? We talked about this a lot during the offseason about Jones has been there. He's been a top 10 pick. He's been the face of the franchise that's failed. Like, there's a lot Richardson can pull from his experiences and learning how to work. But where was that a couple of years ago? I we'll repeat it. You and I have said it 1,000 times. All of this falls at the feet of Anthony Richardson. He's a grown man. He needs to prepare the way he needs to. He needs to understand what being a quarterback in the NFL is. That's on him. He needs to do all those things. But could they have helped him more? Could they have, during those stretches early in the season last year, maybe called a few more design runs as opposed to making him air it out as often as they did? Could Shane Steichen not have had him drop back in that Texans game with like a minute and a half to go and expect him to try to drive down the field and watch him throw nearly a pick six? Like, there's just so many things that I think the Colts kind of screwed up, and we know they did because Chris Ballard said they did. He told Jim Trotter, he told Zach Kiefer, we started him too early. We exposed him too early. He wasn't ready. He was drowning. That's on you then. I mean, that's partly on you then. Like that is your fault. He was a 21-year-old when you drafted, 20-year-old when you drafted him. He was 21 and the season started. He needed help. You didn't give him enough help. Again, I'm going to say it 1,000 times. It's ultimately on Richardson. He needs to have overcome this by himself, but
Yes.
they just didn't seem to help him. And now they seem, as you said, with Steichen, to be distancing themselves from this, saying, well, it wasn't our fault. We couldn't really do much. Not we, and I say we, again, I think Chris Ballard has fallen on the sword. So by
Yeah.
we,
I
I mean
mean,
Shane Steichen.
here's
But
what
yeah,
Steichen said. To your point, Jim, here's what
yeah, go
Steichen
ahead.
said when I straight up presented to him, what have you done? What could you have done differently to help your young quarterback develop? Initially on Tuesday, he said injuries and when you're not out there, it's hard to do the things you want to do. Okay, that's not an answer to the question. Followed up Thursday. What can you do? You, Shane Steichen, what can you do? His answer again was just, in my opinion, a bunch of words that if you put them together, perhaps they make sense in his mind. But to anybody who's listening or trying to understand, they to me did not hold a lot of merit or weight. And so I will read you all just to make sure I don't get this wrong. But here's the exact back and forth that we had. So again, Tuesday, you say it's injuries. Thursday, I follow up. Shane says, in response to what have you done? What could you have done differently? Yeah, I think that's a process. It's a day in and day out process. Like I said, just in the meetings, the classrooms, the fundamentals of everything, and continue to work and stride in those areas. He has made improvements in those areas. I think he's going to continue to improve in those areas. That sounds like an answer about Anthony Richardson and what he's done. So I followed up. Specifically, what do you think you could have done? You, Shane Steichen, not Anthony Richardson. He says, well, I think you look back on those situations. Like I said, I mentioned the injuries, but again, meeting with him. Met a lot with him during those injuries, just obviously from a mental standpoint, staying in it. And I think he did a good job with that. He's continued to improve with that. So those things in the classroom, continue to develop that. And I think that's an ongoing process is where we're going, what we're going through.
I honestly think the answer here is simple. Like, all he had to do, okay, I'll say it this way. He
But what
could
does
have
any of that
said,
mean? Nothing. It is
Nothing.
word
Nothing.
salad. I'm like, and as I wrote my story, I hate word salad, especially with no dressing. It's disgusting. It's bad. I don't want it. I'm like Mike Chappell, the dean, Fox 59 legend, Colts lifer when it comes to reporting things. Chap has never eaten a vegetable in his life, as far as I'm concerned. So when
No,
word
yeah.
salad is offered up, I am like Mike Chappell. Get it out of my face. What the heck was that?
He could have said, and I would have respected him more if he said nothing. There's nothing more I could have done. We did everything we could to try to do. It's on Anthony to try to do. I'm not. And he could say, I'm not blaming Anthony, and I still believe in Anthony, but we did what we could, and Anthony needs to do what he can, and we'll get there. I believe that we'll get there. Like that's an answer. That's an easy answer, and you could have. And I would have respected it. Maybe you would have said, oh, he's throwing him under the bus, but like I don't know. Like
But but here's the thing, Jim. Even if you have to fall on the sword a bit publicly,
do it.
you probably should, because this to me is where the disconnect with Shane Steichen sometimes, at least, and again, I'm not in the locker room. I can't speak to, is he a leader of men and all that? If you win enough games, whatever personality style you have, it works for people.
Sure.
But I do think as a public spokesperson for the team, the person who has to speak more than anybody else throughout the season about the state of a billion-dollar organization, he has fallen flat often. Not one time, not two times, pretty much every time he's had to speak on the quarterback position, a huge decision and who starts and who doesn't, it's fallen flat. And it's been these wordy, nonsensical answers where people are just asking him, can you be transparent for a second? Life in your job is not just X's and O's. And you can't treat it as that. I do believe being a head coach in the NFL is a lot more than just Sundays, than just game days, and just playbooks and tape. He may want it to be like that, but it ain't. Otherwise, you can stay being an offensive coordinator. You can stay on that side of the ball. You can stay behind the scenes. Coordinators speak, once a week. Position coaches speak once every 2 weeks. But as the head coach, you speak every couple of days. And that to me fell flat. And if people don't want to hear that right now, if Anthony doesn't want to hear that right now, I don't blame them.
Yeah. Like I said, I don't blame. All right, so let me pivot here a little bit and try to spin this positively, and you can tell me that I'm an idiot, which is what's going to happen. You'll be
No,
nice
no, I don't talk about my friend
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that.
All right, so when the news broke, I'm just going to be honest with you guys. I'm going to take you behind the scenes of a conversation James and I had.
It was contentious.
Yeah, we yelled at each other quite a bit. Okay, so the initial story that I had pitched, James, was essentially why this isn't the end for Anthony Richardson. And it was based on some of the things that we had heard Chris Ballard say. Starting from the Jim Trotter article that we referenced earlier, who wrote for The Athletic last year, and then following up with what Zach Kiefer wrote when he had talked to him earlier this offseason. We'll start with what Jim said. He told Jimmy he wish he hadn't played him his rookie year. He wish he had sent him. John Dorsey, his longtime friend and executive, said you shouldn't play him, and he's had experience in this area. He told Zach Kiefer the exact same thing. He wished he hadn't played him. He was drowning, is what he said. What I was getting, and he talked about how young he is, and we've talked about this before. Like he is younger than so many of a lot of quarterbacks. I think he's like the same age as Caleb Williams. He's the same age as Cam Ward. He's like, there's a ton of quarterbacks in this league. He's young. So here was my defense, or at least my thought. Chris Ballard is treating this. He regrets what he did, threw him into the Wolves too soon. He screwed it up. We're starting over. Year one. Anthony Richardson, he's a rookie again. We're going to make him, he'll have a quarterback competition with a veteran who we can learn from and look up to. And if he wins, great. But if he doesn't, he sits. And we're going to make him earn it because we didn't make him earn it last time. And that was a big part of our regret. We just handed it to him. We handed it to him year one. And we saw how far that got us. Right, the practice habits weren't there. The immaturity showed up. He didn't understand what it meant to be QB1 in the NFL. So this time, we're not going to hand it to him. This time, we're going to make it hard on him. This time, we're going to call it a quarterback competition, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's just going to go to Daniel Jones because we want Anthony Richardson to be pissed off and to work for it and to prove that he deserves to be the franchise quarterback. And that's the only way they're ever going to find out what they have in Anthony. Not by throwing him to the Wolves again with his back against the wall, but by making him earn it day in and day out with his practice habits, making sure that he is doing everything he needs to be doing as a backup quarterback and preparing. And that way, if he's matured, if he's grown. And when you get him in, and then the next time he takes the field, it's sink or swim. Anyway, this is my pitch. I don't know if I even believe it at this point anymore, But there is part of me that thinks that Chris Ballard really just was like hard reset. He's back to being a rookie. We were going to do what we should have done with him initially.
I want to take your, pitch and just crush it 500 feet dead center, which coming from a guy who can't swing a bat to save his life. If you ever saw my golf swing or my bat swing, it's terrible, Jim. All I have is a jump shot, a little bit of a jump shot. But to answer your question, I do see where that line of thinking could arise and why it would kind of make sense. And in theory, even though Anthony Richardson's fifth-year option, the decision to pick up that fifth-year option is the next offseason being 2026, to me, a lot of it comes down to just what you're doing currently. For example, if you want to reset with Anthony Richardson, when do you realistically think that the reset will be over? When do you give him another chance to go at it? When do you give him a chance to learn, grow, play, and do the things that, based off his resume, and as you alluded to, he didn't or hasn't really done throughout his career, which is just play. I mean, beyond the maturity stuff, he hasn't played a lot of football either. I'll never forget, and Cam Newton, he was great. When Anthony Richardson tapped out,
Yeah.
Cam Newton talked about, Anthony Richardson because they've been compared a lot as far as the physical gifts, and Anthony looks up to him. Cam Newton really hammered home the fact that when he went to junior college, not just, yes, I was the man, I went to Florida at first, it didn't work out, transferred to Auburn, became the man, obviously one of the greatest college players we've ever seen. The man's got his own statue outside of their stadium. But he was even saying, when I had to go to the JUCO level, I still got reps. I had to be in the huddle. I had to command the huddle. I had to be the leader of the team. I had to be accountable. I had to go to meetings. I had to do all these things that prepared me, even though it wasn't the highest level of the sport, just the repetition, the familiarity, all those things helped. And for Anthony, he hasn't had that. So when you tell me, I want to do a hard reset, yeah, but I'm like, okay, I get he's only 23. I get that even the contract situation you have coming up, in theory, you could give him an extension that isn't super lucrative. You can keep him around.
Right.
But just realistically, when is he going to play? When is he going to be your guy? Because if you're saying you're not good enough to win with us, with Daniel Jones, and I look at this twofold. If Daniel Jones goes out there and leads you to the playoffs, which is a possibility in a wide open division, I feel like every year it's a possibility. It might not be a great one, but I think it's realistic if I squint my eyes a little bit. But then he's your guy. Daniel Jones is your guy. And you have to decide, do you want to pay him? Do you want to keep him around? And then on the flip side of that is if Daniel Jones flames out, are you going to restart again next year with Anthony Richardson? 3 years after you drafted him? Is that a move that will be, one, done by this regime? Will Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen even be around if this Daniel Jones thing doesn't work out for you to do that? And then number two, if they aren't, if you bring in a new GM and a new head coach, they're not going to be beholden to the guy you drafted fourth overall a couple years ago that they didn't pick.
Yeah, he'll be gone.
So that's where I just have a hard time kind of squint my eyes to see it, Jim. Like, yes, Chris Ballard might, tell our Zach Kiefer, hey, you believe in something, you stick with it. If it gets me fired, so be it. Well, it might get you fired. It really might get you fired. And to me, that is also what is at stake when you look at the totality of the Anthony Richardson, Daniel Jones decision. Again, if you tell me Anthony Richardson is not a starting quarterback in the NFL, agreed. He's not. He's not proven he can be that. But if you tell me that Daniel Jones is the answer, I'm not going to be sitting here saying he is. I mean, you're giggling, you're smirking because you've probably seen more of this than me. But I go back to what I've heard or read from our Dan Duggan, from our Charlotte Carroll, from I believe it's Pat Leonard who covers the Giants as well out there. Just hearing them talk about Daniel Jones. Yes, there was a lot going on in New York. Yes, they could have had better infrastructure around him. Yes, they could have had better talent. But ultimately, he still is a player in his own right, and that player has not been a very good one. So that's where I think they've kind of put themselves in this hole a bit and kind of backed themselves up where it's all or nothing on Daniel Jones. And that's what, to me, all of them are betting on. You're betting your future, if you're Chris Ballard, if you're Shane Steichen, on Daniel Jones. And again, if you feel convicted in that, fine, but I do not.
Who could? I mean, you just saw like the if you look at the odds for the look at the odds for the coach most likely to be fired first. You know who's number one on that list? Brian Dable. You know who Brian Dable's quarterback was the last 3 years? Daniel Jones. Like they won 9 games in the last 2 years combined, largely with Daniel Jones as the quarterback.
That's what I'm
Um,
saying. And I want to
the time.
ask you this. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I don't want to cut you off
Oh, I
too.
was just gonna say the times he wasn't the quarterback because he was hurt. That's all I was gonna
Yeah.
say.
And that's another thing. Is this guy going to be durable enough to hold up? But I want to ask you, as someone who, again, has seen a lot more Daniel Jones games and tape and obviously edited more stories than the average person,
Hmm.
has anyone, I say this tongue in cheek, but has anyone benefited more by not playing for the last however many months than Daniel Jones? Because sometimes when I hear like some of the conversations about him, Jim, he's this stabilizing force. He's so steady. He's consistent.
No.
If we're looking purely at completion percentage, yes, he's consistent. His career completion percentage, I think, is like 64%. He might have had the Giants record a few years ago, which Shane Steichen referenced. But overall, the player I'm hearing people compare or say that he is, I'm like, am I punked? Is Ashton Kutcher gonna walk out and say like, James, you've been punked? Because the guy that they're describing, Jim, I just cannot get with that. Now, if you tell me we believe that we can reestablish him, that's one thing. But to tell me, oh, we trust him and it's the consistency, it's what he put on tape. When I ask Shane Steichen, when's the last time, why do you believe you can win with this guy when the last time we saw him play good was a couple years ago? And the first thing you rely on or you turn to is tape from 3 years ago. I mean, so again, my long-winded question, my soliloquy, my rant is over, but who is the real Daniel Jones? And has he benefited a lot from just not playing?
Yeah, that's I guess. I mean, I don't know. I didn't feel like people were clamoring for him when he was a free agent. It felt like it was the Colts against Minnesota, and Minnesota he
Right.
wasn't
And
going to
then
be
it
the, he wasn't
shifted
gonna,
when it got here to like, this guy is like, man, he's so cerebral, he's consistent. I'm like looking at his career numbers, like, who?
it's he's still Daniel Jones. He's still I did the odd people love citing. I mean, including Chris Ballard when talking about Anthony Richardson. People love citing the Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield, the Geno Smith resurrection stories, and those are great. But like, first of all, you have to believe you have a coach who's capable of doing that. And I don't know that we know that Shane Steichen is. Second of all, you have to have a quarterback who's capable of doing that. And a lot of those guys were younger. Oh, when they did. Sam Darnold came into the league really young, like Anthony Richardson. Baker had at least shown. I mean, Baker had one of the best rookie year quarterback like ever. Like he was incredible his rookie season. Daniel Jones was never incredible. And the Geno Smith thing is second round picks. So it's a little different. But I Daniel Jones is not your savior. Let me just let me just say it that way. He has spurts of solid games. Like I remember last year, I was trying to pitch to Dan Duggan after they beat Seattle 29-20 in Week 5. They had won um, they had won 2 out of 3, and like that was 4 games set. I know I'm including when they lost, but he had thrown 6 touchdowns versus 1 pick. And I was like, yeah, it's a pretty good run. Like maybe they're figuring something out with Daniel Jones a little bit. Maybe he's clicking a little bit more. I remember Dan Duggan being like, no, this is this is just a blip on the radar. Don't do this to yourself. And I was like, okay, well, wait. Next game, Cincinnati Bengals. 22 of 41, so a 53% completion percentage, 1 pick. He took 2 sacks. They scored 7 points against the Cincinnati Bengals, one of the worst defenses in football last year. Then he gets his butt kicked by the Eagles, which again, the Eagles are good, obviously a super good team. 28-3, takes 7 sacks. Like, okay, sorry, Dan. Sorry I even thought that maybe Daniel Jones was going to be, like, was figuring it out because that's just not who he is. It's not in him. Now, I think this is not even a bet on Daniel Jones, to be honest with you. I think this is a bet on, I think Shane's betting on Shane. Shane is saying,
Ooh, I like this. Okay, tell me more because I hadn't really thought about that. Okay.
so I think he's thinking he's going to turn himself into the next Kyle Shanahan, Kevin O'Connell type of coach where it's I'm going to take my quarterback and point and shoot. Like I'm going to tell you where to point. I'm going to point where and you shoot there. That's what you're going to do. I'm going to be the mad scientist, offensive coordinator that's going to draw up and scheme up players that are open. And Daniel Jones, this is no sarcasm, is a more accurate quarterback than Anthony Richardson is. So if I scheme it open, he's going to hit it. I'm going to scheme it open. I'm going to tell him where to throw it. He's going to throw it there. And I'm going to bet on myself to be able to out scheme and out game plan every defensive coordinator that we come against. And Daniel Jones is going to take advantage of it.
Ooh.
It sounds okay. Brian Dable once thought that he could do that, and for like half a season, he pulled it off in that season that Shane Steichen cited, that 2022 season, like half a year. Daniel Jones did those things. Second half of the year, not so much. Now, credit where credit's due. He had a good wild card game against Minnesota. Then he got his butt kicked in the playoffs after that. But whatever.
Yeah, that was his one like good to great year. And I'm not going to take
Yeah,
that away from him. And that's certainly more than what Anthony Richardson has shown
for
in the
sure.
NFL. But
His resume is
again,
better. There's no doubt about
oh yeah,
that.
absolutely. But I'm just looking at the totality of the situation. And again,
He's not your
and
savior.
people can tell me, hey, you're being a jerk or, you're really hammering these guys. But I'm genuinely curious because if you tell me, hey, we're benching Anthony, we're going with Daniel Jones, that's fine. But don't sit up there and try to tell me that Daniel Jones is like some good quarterback. He's not.
Yeah,
The Giants basically said, pack your bags and leave now, please. And everyone in that area or market was like, yeah, we're sick of this guy. Goodbye. And he's not like,
well,
I don't want to paint it like Daniel Jones is a bad human or something
no,
like that.
no.
But they were sick of his play. They paid him a ton of money after that great season in 2022. And then after that, after paying him all that money, they basically were like, keep the money and just leave.
Yeah, they paid a
Pick the
lot of money to
channel.
leave to go.
Exactly. And
Yeah,
to me, that is pretty damning. And for you to say that you're hitching your wagon to that you believe in that you can fix that, yeah, that might be a bet on Shane. And I go back to the beginning of our conversation. You bet on Shane before with Anthony Richardson. You bet on Shane again with Joe Flacco. You're betting on him again with Daniel Jones. So his track record outside of Philly has not been good in Indianapolis at all as far as quarterback play, development, or lack thereof. And this idea that a guy going to his seventh year is still going to be like a developing player to me is kind of ridiculous too, because at some point you're going to
yeah.
plateau. And in my opinion, Daniel Jones is probably already plateaued. Now, I'm not saying he can't play better football overall, but getting better, no, I just can't buy that. So it is a tough situation, but at the same time, to sort of spin it ahead, this is why Daniel Jones came here. He
Yeah.
came here because he looked at the landscape of the NFL and said, you know what? I'll leave comparable money on the table in Minnesota to be JJ McCarthy's backup to go to Indianapolis because two things. Anthony Richardson can't stay healthy. I'll get on the field somehow. Or I can just go and take his job by being the more consistent quarterback, the more professional quarterback, if that's even a thing, as far as some of the, showing up early, staying late, all the little things that they want the quarterback position to do. I can do that. And so, again, that's not to say Anthony wasn't doing that, at least to a certain extent this offseason, but perhaps a little bit too late. And I do wonder when Shane's mind was truly made up. Because to me, Jim, you can't definitively say, at least from what I saw from on-field performance throughout training camp, that one quarterback clearly outplayed the other. It was not like that. They were pretty even. And again, I was kind of in the camp of like, if it's even, you just roll with the young guy. But as they said, a lot of it had to do with their operational stuff, the behind the
Hmm.
scenes stuff. And for their sake, this better work. Because if it doesn't, and let's say they go 8-9, 7-10, miss the playoffs, whatever, I don't think that's enough to keep everybody around, and I don't think it's warranted or justified to keep
No,
everybody around. At that point, you're like, well, you had your chance. Chris Ballard, number one on that list, has had plenty of chances.
I was gonna say he's on his ninth life here. So
Yeah, and then for Shane Steichen and obviously Anthony Richardson, you have to wonder what the future holds. To me, that's one of the biggest overarching themes of the season is who's going to be here come next year. That's the elephant in the room.
it's funny you said that Daniel Jones benefited from not playing. I kind of can't help but wonder if like Richardson doesn't play this year, how much he'll benefit from that when he gets if he gets the
I'm
open
telling
market
you, man,
next
all
year
you
or on
gotta
a trade
do is
market.
just, lay low, be a good teammate, and then let's see in a couple months how the narrative perhaps shifts. But I will say again, at least Daniel, you have, okay, well, we saw him do it one time before. Can you do it again? For Anthony, it's just not the case. You have not had any sustained success for him. I mean, the guy hasn't even played, let alone played well, 4 games, more than 4 games in a row in his career. So, Jim, it's never dull in
Hmm.
Indianapolis. A good thing that we're always prepared, I guess, for what's going on here. But it certainly was a busy week and one where I just think a lot changed for this franchise. And I do wonder again, just how confident everybody is, and will this plan still be the plan a month from now? Because, they're expected to win. That the decision you made was like, okay, the present outweighs the future at all costs. So go win. If you don't win, then hey, maybe you're looking for employment elsewhere, perhaps like Anthony Richardson might be after this season. I will say real quick though, I don't think that, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts. I don't think Anthony should request a trade right now. Like if he wants out, and again, this isn't a report, this is just me speculating.
Yeah.
If he truly wants out, if his agent says, you know what, man, we can't trust these guys, we got to go. Like they've kind of, you haven't done your part to a degree, but they haven't helped you out either. We're gone, we're done. I think it would help him stay in this system for this season and kind of do how similarly to other quarterbacks have done to revitalize their career perhaps elsewhere. They get the entire offseason and kind of build that runway somewhere else and to build that rapport somewhere else. Because for someone who, again, has had the operational issues, has had issues grasping the offense, even in year 3, I think of that blown, obviously blitz package against the Ravens in the preseason opener. I don't think that the best thing for Anthony will be to, demand a trade, go somewhere else, be dropped in a new system, and try to learn it all during the season. And then again, you might have a chance to get back in the lineup because forget whatever they say. We can't go based off what they say. What they've done in the past is give you the keys again after the guy they want to roll with did not play well. So that to me is very interesting, Jim, is if Daniel Jones plays poorly and if they lose games, will they really have the audacity and the guts to go back to Anthony Richardson? Will they?
Are you asking me? Because I think they will. I think
You
they
think
have
they
to.
will?
They're going to try. Yeah, I think they did it last time with Flacco. I don't know why they wouldn't do it again this time. Like and Daniel Jones might prove himself to be completely unworthy of winning. Like, again,
Yeah.
he was with the Giants. They had a lot of problems. I don't want to throw it all at Daniel Jones' feet,
Nah,
but
bad offensive line, bad skill position players. I was looking at some of these lists from back in the day, and I was
brutal.
like, who was he throwing to? So yeah, I get that, but man,
Can I
wow,
say
you,
on the trade front?
you think they would do that?
Yeah, and let me say on the trade front, I
Okay, go
agree
ahead.
with you to one with an exception.
Okay.
If I'm Anthony Richardson and his agent, and they want to talk, I'm not requesting a trade. However, if I catch wind and an agent is allowed to maybe do that,
Yeah.
there are a few Vikings, Kevin O'Connell, 49ers, Shanahan, Rams, McVay. That's maybe it. Those are the quarterback whisperers that I trust. And if they want my client, I am maybe then taking it to the Colts and saying I might be interested in getting out. That's the only. I wouldn't request a trade. I'm with you. I think that he's got enough going on for him off the field stuff for people who they think he is. That requesting a
Yeah.
trade and being a malcontent doesn't seem like a good idea.
Exactly.
That said, if one of those teams are showing, maybe the Packers too. I meant to throw LaFleur in there. If one of those teams was interested, it'd be interesting for me if I were Derek Jackson and Anthony Richardson, because that's where some of these guys have gone to fix themselves. I mean, obviously Dave Canales is part of the reason Baker Mayfield and Geno Smith have had their. So I guess maybe Carolina you could even think about, but yeah, there's just a few spots where if I'm Anthony Richardson and I want to get on the quarterback rehabilitation program, there are certain coaches I'd like to be with. So again, I wouldn't request a trade, but I do think that if he's smart and his agent's smart, and this doesn't work out in Indy, and I'm not ready to say that's official yet, but if this doesn't work out in Indy, that's where I'd be looking to go next. And like you said, maybe even probably as a backup, I should say, to get a year under these guys. I mean, that's what Sam Darnold did. Sam Darnold spent that year in San Francisco before going to Minnesota and doing that with Kevin O'Connell. Like, that's the smart way to play this. So anyway, and yes, to answer your other question, I do think I think they'll turn back to him. I think they will. And their hand might not be forced, because I do think Daniel Jones is injury prone. It takes a lot of sacks. So he might just end up getting hurt and then having to put Richardson in there. But so maybe we won't even get the true answer as to whether the Colts would do it given the choice. And we might just get forced into it. But it's going to be fascinating to see this season. And by fascinating, I mean, I wonder how quickly Colts fans are going to turn on Daniel Jones and Shane Steichen, because it could happen quick. Like, Miami,
I think that it'll happen if they don't score on their first 2 drives of the Miami game. I'm serious.
That's pretty
I
fast,
truly
yeah.
believe. I truly believe it being a home game too. A home game, you don't score in your first 2 drives and you go down 7-0 or something like that. They will boo them. Don't go 3 and out, and please don't go 6 and out. Your first 2 drives, they will boo them to the high heavens. And this is not an open air press box at Lucas Oil Stadium. but I promise you I'll be able to hear the boos if that
Yeah, you'll hear
happens.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so, and again, I don't think that necessarily be directed toward Daniel Jones per se, more so just the decision to put him in there in the first place by the higher ups. And so, yeah, it's never dull in this city, man. There's always some chaos, I feel like, going on with the Colts since I've joined the team. Don't blame me, though. I don't make those decisions. I just react to them. So, next up on the docket, Jim, we have a preseason finale where Anthony Richardson will not play. Again, just as the reminder for those out there. Riley Leonard will get the start, Jason Bean in the second half, and that will round out the preseason for the Colts. Coming up next on Tuesday is the official roster cut down date. That's when we go from 90 players to 53, and so I'll have a reaction to that. And I believe, Jim, next week we will also hear from Chris Ballard because he usually does his yearly kind of end of preseason, pre-real season news conference. We'll be able to follow up on a lot more of these developments, the Anthony Richardson, benching or demotion, whatever you want to call it, Daniel Jones being the guy, Shane Steichen, how is he handling all of these decisions, et cetera, et cetera. So for those of you all who have listened, I appreciate it. Those of you all who have read, I appreciate that as well. You can subscribe to the James Boyd podcast, wherever you get your podcast. And for those who kept asking, yes, this will be on YouTube podcast, YouTube audio. I'll probably sound like a boomer right now because I have no idea what I'm referencing, but it will be on YouTube in some capacity. So
mute my mic right now. Yeah.
I know. But for those that are listening, again, thanks so much for listening. We'll check in with you all next week.